Christmas in March. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Earlier this year, the Justice Department designated the month of February as the National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. Vice President Biden commended the development, emphasizing, quote, teen dating violence is all too common and ends up leading to vicious and unhealthy cycles for years to come. Our responsibility as parents, teachers, mentors, and community leaders is to guide our young people toward respectful relationships free from harassment and abuse, teach them that it's okay to walk away from a bad situation, and encourage them to speak out when they see a friend in trouble. Those are the words of Joseph Biden. Well, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill this week, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid linked rising unemployment to increased violence against women and girls.
While I was home dealing with domestic abuse, it has gotten out of hand. Why? Men don't have jobs. Women don't have jobs either, but women aren't abusive most of the time. Men, when they're out of work, tend to become abusive. Our domestic crisis shelters in Nevada are jammed. It's the way it is all over the country.
Domestic violence came up again during Thursday's healthcare summit in an intervention by New York Congressmember Louise Slaughter.
Pre-existing conditions absolutely has to go. It is cruel, it is capricious, and it is done only to enhance the bottom line. 8 states in this country right now have declared that domestic violence is a pre-existing condition on the grounds, I assume, that if you've been unlucky enough to get yourself beaten up once, you might go around and do it again.
Well, I'm joined here in our New York studio by someone who's made it her lifelong mission to end violence against women and girls. Eve Ensler is the founder of V-Day, the best-selling author and playwright behind the Vagina Monologues. Her latest book is a collection of fictional monologues and stories inspired by girls. It's called I'm an Emotional Creature, The Secret Life of Girls Around the World. We welcome you to Democracy Now!
Happy to be here.
Congratulations. Also, thank you for coming in on this very snowy day in New York. But why did you choose The Secret Life of Girls Around the World as your topic?
Well, I, have had the great fortune, as you know, over the last 12 years to travel around the world with V-Day. And often I go to places kind of sort of like the rape mines of the world. I live in really difficult situations where women are being violated, are being raped, are being mutilated. And in the last 12 years, I've met so many girls facing so many obstacles, and I've heard so many interesting stories and experiences that I don't see reported in a lot of places, particularly when people are talking about what the world is really like for girls. And so I just started to put stories together and to just investigate and write down things I was hearing as I was going and imagine things that I might be hearing if there were another world. And over the last 5 years of writing this book, this theme began to emerge, which is that it didn't really matter what country I was in. There seems to be this global mandate, a familiar mandate, a societal or religious mandate for girls to please somebody, in some form or another. And it ranges from the upper-class suburbs where girls feel they are nobody if they don't have the new pair of purple Uggs, to girls in other kind of situations in suburbs starving themselves to look a certain way, to girls in Kenya who are forced into traditions to have their clitoris removed, to girls in Israel who are saying if you don't join the army you're not part of this culture, and it goes on and on and on. And I started to really see that this verb to please seems to be the single verb that girls are kind of enforced with, and that 74% of the girls interviewed in this one survey said they felt compelled to please everyone all the time. So I just started thinking, what if we changed the verb? What if the verb were to challenge or to protest or to organize or to create or to dare or to do anything but please? And even the statistics you were talking about earlier, why are so many girls, I think it's 1 out of 5 girls in this country will find themselves in a relationship where they are hit, slapped, or punched. Why? 1 out of 5 girls in the year 2010. Why? And so much of that is about pleasing and being afraid that if you don't go along with a situation, you won't have a boyfriend, you'll be left alone. So you end up giving up your own integrity, your own authentic voice, and your own values to please somebody else.
So tell us about the specific stories you chose, like the Chinese girl making Barbie dolls.
Well, I've been obsessed with Barbie for a long time, and because I just you know, all these things that I've learned about Barbie, too, that she was actually modeled on a sex toy named Lily, and that's how it came to be. So you just think about that this toy that has now, they've sold 1 billion Barbies on the planet. A Barbie gets sold every 3 seconds. So this is a sex toy that's being marketed to girls all around the world as an ideology or as an image or an idea of who they're supposed to be. And I started just doing research about who makes Barbie and who spends, and the conditions in the factories in Asia where girls are who make Barbie. And I just imagined this girl who was making Barbie's head all day, and what was it like as an Asian girl in a factory who's getting basically slave wages, maybe a little bit higher than slave wages. What is her life like as she sits and makes Barbies for people in the West who can fill their dream houses with Barbies, as she is sitting there in a sweaty factory getting cut all day on machines? And the piece is really about her profound imagination and how she head sends her thoughts into each Barbie she makes. And she sends her message around the world, which is really about freeing Barbie and having Barbie go from makeover to takeover, and releasing the 1 million Barbies on the planet who she believes are really kind of undercover geniuses who, if we allowed them, would rise up and take over. But I also think that the story of Barbie and the making of Barbie is kind of the story of the world. That we have a girl starving in a factory in China, producing a doll that ends up being, you know, coming to the West and encouraging girls to starve themselves here so they can look like her. So it's this kind of, you know, evolution of starvation on one form or another for girls and about girls. And I think it's a way of linking the worlds too. So we see how the kind of exploitation of child labor ends up exploiting girls on a whole other level once it comes here.
Speaking of starving themselves, you have this girl blogging, and the more she blogs, the less she eats.
Yes. Well, you know, when I did The Good Body, I spent a lot of time listening to girls about eating disorders, and I spent time in eating disorder clinics, and I'm overwhelmed to see the kind of rise in eating disorders right now in not only this country but all over the world, because as we export our TV shows and our images, you know, it's proven that after certain TV shows come into a certain country, within a year, the eating disorders rise. And I think this notion that girls will only be happy when they're the size of a pencil, you know, based on eating a raisin a day, what is the real ideology behind that? You know, girls starving themselves. Well, it's about disappearing. If you become less and less and less, you actually won't be here eventually. You won't take up space. You won't have power. You can't think very well when you don't eat. It turns out we actually need food for thoughts, and to have expansive thoughts or deep thoughts, you actually have to put nutrients in your body. And I think part of what I've been looking at in this country is seeing this kind of compulsion, this cellular compulsion, this kind of mainlined into girls from the time they're born to look a certain way. And usually that way is, I always joke about it, but there's probably 5 women in Iceland who look the way 99% of the planet doesn't look, but is trying to look. You know, most people on the planet are people of color. They're round. They're very specific. They're, you know, but everybody is being compelled to look skinny, white, blonde, and again, it becomes an occupation. It takes up a lot of time. You become distracted. You don't focus on changing the healthcare system. You don't focus on saving people's lives. You don't focus on reaching out. You focus on your body. It's a very narcissistic occupation.
And the Bulgarian sex slave who's 15 years old.
That was based on a true story. I was in Bulgaria for a V-Day where I was asked to come because of the sex trafficking that was going on there. And when I arrived, I was rushed to this meeting with a girl who only had 35 minutes before her pimp came looking for her. And although the monologue, you know, obviously it's a fictional piece, it was a very, very disturbing interview, which I'll never forget, of a 15-year-old girl who had cigarette burns all over her body because her body was like an ashtray, and she had herpes, and she was just a mess, and literally had been sold to onto the streets. She couldn't get out. Her parents would be killed if she spoke up, and she was so panicked in that 35 minutes because she was sure any second that her pimp would arrive and kill her. And the group that I was with was trying to get her off the streets and trying to help her, but were really torn between protecting her at the exact right moment where to transition her would not impact her staying alive.
Congo is an issue you take on